G'day guys, it's Anthony from Mower Lawns and Gardens. Today I'm going to go through the procedure for doing a oil change on the Honda HRU196 self-propelled commercial lawnmower. They are the same engine as the Honda HRU196 push mower, so if you have one or the other or both, the oil change procedure is identical. Typically the oil changes only take about 10 minutes. That includes warming the engine up, getting the oil thin so that you can extract it, pouring in the flush oil, flushing the engine, extracting that oil, and then pouring in the run oil. We use the Honda specified oil, and I'll leave the details in the comments below as to which oil we use. I found this to be reliable. I've had machines go into their 4th season before needing a rebuild, only to have to replace a piston and set of rings and then get continued use out of them. Now, Honda recommend, and they may have changed this from the time of recording, but 25 hours between oil change intervals when you're using your mower commercially. But the best way to decide as to when the machine is ready for an oil change is just check the color of the oil on the dipstick, and your daily checks should be able to tell you when the machine is ready for an oil change. And I will go through that procedure with you when we do the oil change. If the oil has started to go dark, you'll be getting very close to needing an oil change, because these single cylinder engines, which are only air cooled, will start to deteriorate with the oil quality very quickly once the engine oil has started to go dark. Bear in mind the conditions also warrant whether the oil change needs to be done earlier or later, depending on how much work is being done and obviously the type of work that's being done. So conditions will vary, and obviously the intervals between the oil change will vary. But as I said, the best indicator is to just do a dipstick check, look at the color of the oil, and if it has gone dark, then it's getting ready for an oil change. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and hopefully this content will help you. And we'll get started on doing the oil change on the Honda HRU196 now. This is the Honda HRU196, it's our self-propelled machine, and this is the Honda HRU196, which is our push. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the engines are identical on both machines. They're Honda 6 horsepower engine, and the dipstick can be located at the side of the machine closest to the exhaust. Okay, so let's do a check of the oil. Before we do that, this is new engine oil, and you can see the difference in the new engine oil. I'll just dip my finger in it. That is quite clear, as you can see it on my finger. And we're going to take out and check the oil in the used machine. We're just going to wipe on our finger, and you can see the colour difference. So there's our new engine oil, and there's one that's actually just started to change colour. And you can see it on the dipstick as well. So easiest way to check it, dip the dipstick into the engine, wipe it on your finger, and if you can see there's a colour difference between that and that, your engine oil has just started to deteriorate and it would be ready for an oil change, and this machine is up around the 25 hours. Now this is a machine that we did an oil change on only about a day ago, and we're going to check it just quickly. You can see only after a few hours of use compared to, again, just the fresh engine oil. So we'll just dip our finger in there. You can see that's clear. I'll take the dipstick out, wipe it on our finger, and you can see this engine oil does not need changing. So that'll go probably another 22, 23 hours. It was only used for a couple of hours yesterday before it needs an oil change. The next thing we want to do is start the engine, and this will allow us to bring the oil up to operation temperature, which will also thin the oil out, and that'll allow the oil to come out of the sump easier. So we'll just start the engine and run it for about a minute. Okay, so that's our oil temperature up. Now we'll get the oil out of the sump and clean the sump with some fresh oil. Okay, so the machine has been running now, and the oil will be up to operation temperature, and this will thin the oil out, which will make it easy to extract the old oil out of the machine. We're going to be emptying the oil out of the machine through the dipstick, and that means leaning the machine over on the exhaust side. As we lean the machine over, it's important to make sure that it doesn't start. So we'll take the spark plug lead out for safety, but that's also because we will be rotating the engine in order to get any last pieces of oil out of the engine. So we're going to go ahead and take that dipstick out now, and just going to show you one last time. Although when you wipe it on your hands, you might think that's not black. What you'll notice is when we actually pour this out, I'm using a clear container just so you can see, the engine oil will actually be quite dark, and you can see that definitely warrants an oil change. So we're going to empty all that into the container. Now I'm going to pull start the engine just to put some back pressure on the sump, and this forces the oil to come out, which gets more of the old oil out. Okay, so we're just going to leave that there for a minute, let it drain so we can get as much of that old oil out as possible. Okay, so it's been a minute and the engine's finished draining the oil, so we're now just going to pick that back up, send it over, and you can see pretty clearly, or not so clearly, that engine oil is due for changing, and it's at the end of its life. So we're just going to dispose of that, and I just use an oil container where I keep all my old oil and then eventually dispose of it correctly. As mentioned earlier in the video, this is the genuine Honda oil that we use for our oil changes. It is a 10W30 premium Honda oil. It's available to purchase from any of your Honda dealerships. This comes in 4 litres, 1 litre, and if you're doing large amount of oil changes like we do, you can purchase it in a 20 litre quantity. Even though we've emptied all the old oil of that engine, there will still be some remnants of the old oil that we want to remove, and the best way to do that is with an oil flush. So what we want to do now is just measure out about 250 mils thereabouts of clean oil and pour it down the dipstick funnel, taking your time with it, making sure you don't spill it. And it's not necessary to start the engine, but what we want to do is just give a few pulls while that clean oil is in there, and this will facilitate just the cleaning of the engine and the removal of the last bit of the old oil. Okay, now we'll empty that back out. Obviously we had the spark plug lead removed so the engine wouldn't start. Tip our engine over. And now you can see that the engine is somewhat cleaner. Okay, now as you can see, that is still dirty. So the flush procedure obviously is warranted because the dirty oil that's left in there, we do want to get it out. Now I'm going to discard that, and the engine is now cleaned and ready for the run oil. The Honda 216 and 196 engines take 650 mils, so we're going to pour out 650 mils, which is just to that black line there. Pour a little under it, that way if we need to top it up we can do. And again, just slowly we're going to pour the oil down the dipstick spout. Now take your time when you pour this in so that we don't spill any. Okay, now we're just going to let that settle. and then we'll do an oil level check. Okay, so we've got our run oil in there now, and we've measured out the 650 mils. So what we want to do is do a dipstick check to see what level it is. You'll notice on the dipstick there's an area which has got crosses on it. Where we want the oil to read is the top of it. On the Hondas, when you're checking your oil, we just sit it there and do not screw it in. If we were to screw it in, it would go down deeper and that would give us a false reading. So to check oil, the dipstick just sits on there, pull it back out, and you can see that the oil is right on that high level, and that's the correct amount of oil that we've got in there. So just going to screw that back in there now, and this engine will be ready to start and run. Okay, so let's pop our spark plug lead back on just before we start it. And we're going to start the machine now that the oil change has been done, and then we're going to check the dipstick one more time. Okay, so we just start it, idle it for about 10 seconds, that gets the oil through the machine. Let it settle again so that the oil level finds where it can be checked correctly. Then we'll pull the dipstick out and check the oil level. Okay, so we're going to do a oil check now. We've just run the engine and we've let the oil settle again, and the oil is all over the dipstick, so we just want to wipe that. Now we've got a clean dipstick. Again, when we're checking the oil on the 216 and the 196 engines, we just sit it there, we don't screw it in. We then take it out and we can see that the oil, and whilst it might be difficult to see on video, the clear oil obviously is a little harder to identify, but that oil is sitting right at the end of the high level of the dipstick, and that is exactly where we want it. So our oil change has been done, and this machine should be right for another 25 hours, but we will check our dipstick daily to confirm the quality of the oil, so that we don't let it go any longer than we should. That's the oil change complete on our Honda 216. As I said, it's the same for doing the engine on the 196. The steps involved I'll put down below for you to go through, and if there's any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks guys.